Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Hey, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend and the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Hey, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.
Howdy, folks. Your host, Double J, back here, coming at you live from my studio/RV dining room, located in the apparently the very sus areas of America, directly inside America. Welcome back, folks of the interwebs. Once again, your host, JJ Vance here, host of Operation GCD, and perhaps more notably, not the vice president. Anyhow, welcome back, folks of the interwebs. Thanks again for joining me here tonight to get a little GCD. I will be your pilot and navigator for tonight's shenanigan-infused journey. Yes, sir, Jimmy Bobby. 7 minutes, very important. And tonight's shenanigan-infused journey into the mind of this particular garbage can dude. And want to thank y'all again for joining me here tonight for another disregard Operation GCD Thursdaze, the anatomy of the Satanic Panic. So, I'm not going to lie to you folks of the interwebs, got a real barn burner here on deck for y'all tonight. You know, on these matters concerning the ongoing, and I do mean ongoing. So, we've been unpacking these matters of the psychological operations known as the Satanic Panic here in this series. And this is the free Patreon side previews of these matters as we've been unpacking these things in larger details and getting to the root of these matters, so to speak, over on the Patreon side. And I do highly recommend folks check that out. Come on over there and join the conversation. But we do see ongoing matters, literally yesterday's, the day before today's, in the state of Minnesota. It should be part of Canada, if you ask me, but we see these matters again. Another quote unquote Nazi satanic assassin, right? These, espousing O9A, Order of Nine Angles, which is the, a Nazi satanic organization. And not unlike old Muppet Mikey Aino, our favorite star here on Thursdaze, right? The man who brings us these psychological operations, such as the Satanic Panic, as we've been seeing that in his communication. Well, we've been unpacking his own statements to see how in the Phoenix program, that Bill Colby, the former CIA director there guy, and all of his queers, Colby's programs, Operation Gladio, Phoenix program, serial killers, Air America, drug trafficking, all of these things seem to, kind of circle around a very small group of folks, doing a bunch of hood rat shit. And they all seem to coincide around these ongoing matters of what I would call that Satanic Murder Inc. in Operation Gladio style form to not only to provide domestic, it serves a multitude of purposes, folks. I like to call it the whole hog effect, as obviously domestic terror, that's a big part of it, right? Sometimes there's a hit involved in some of these activities. We've kind of discussed some of that, so there is matters that seem to be ongoing with all of these things. And the O9A, the Order of the Nine Angles, is no different than the rest of these quote unquote Nazi satanic bastards, no different than old Muppet Mikey Aino, as we see their theology is all rooted in the same Nazi Satanism nonsense, if you will, ceremonial magic, Thelema business, if to a certain regard there. And we also see the ancient alien cargo cult business going on. And I don't know if y'all caught this in the introduction, but those damn ancient alien cargo cults are haunting the pale moonlight. That's what I heard in the song, at least. So, and we see that continuing to proliferate around these things, around these psychological operations. Again, ongoing. How many times recently have we seen the same pattern of behavior around these same quote unquote lone nut killers, right? We had that one in Houston a few months back. His mother literally has the Process Church tattoo, wears Process Church logo t-shirts, has Charles Manson's face tattooed, like right about here on her arm, and apparently aided and abetted her son to go assault his high school down there in Houston, Texas. We saw the fellow up there in northern Idaho, who's the son of a Nazi Satanist werewolf fucker, which Michael Aquino cites in his own book, The Church of Satan, as we've gone over in this series thus far, folks. that he started this little werewolf sect of their Satanism business, right? With it even into the Temple of Set, based upon his love affair for Nazis. So the werewolf sect of these matters, and these fuckers, they LARP as werewolves, This, and the fellow that got into the shootout there apparently murked a couple firefighters on an anniversary of the Aryan Nation going bankrupt, by the way. That weird Nazi compound that all these Satanist fuckers are connected to, along with Colby Squares. We see that epicenter between John Todd, as we were discussing last week, with Randy Weaver of the Ruby Ridge situation, which right now we're in the anniversary of that Ruby Ridge situation right now. So, and Aquino even cites Thomas Eugene Creech here, the Idaho satanic serial killer who survived his execution and remains on death row, or disregard. I think they still are trying to kill the guy. Anyhow, we see again these ongoing matters and continuing the matters no one's recognized despite all these patterns, and we have a long history of it. We see the ongoing epidemic, and I do say epidemic, of pay no attention to your senses. Do not believe your eyes and ears, folks. These are the tales of and procedures of Muppet Mikey Aquino and his psychological operations of the Satanic Panic, where we've seen him recite the same scripts in TV interviews, podcast interviews, emails with Dave McGowan, the man who would old Muppet Mikey was pretty butthurt about back in 2001, because McGowan had provided this thesis that all of these satanic murders, these serial killers, are the Phoenix program come home, Colby Squares. So, and again, not commentary on their sexual proclivities, folks, but on the strange and anomalous nature and impact they've had on our society, and still do, because if we have all of these folks that are doing the same Nazi Satan stuff, and again, they all profess humanity is the devil, right? And we kind of went over that this past Sundays. If any folks of the interwebs tune in for both the Sundays and the Thursdays here on Operation GCD Patreon business, I appreciate the support. We went over the Zizian death cult, that Silicon Valley based, AI focused, rationalist, despite nothing being rational there, vegan, transpocalypse, homicidal death cult. So again, they're not like screaming I'm the process, or I'm Order of Nine Angles, but they recite the same philosophies and ideology. So what are we talking about here? So we see these matters proliferating still today, and the ongoing, there was no satanic murders back then, so there's no satanic murders now. And we see how they've tied that in. When I say they, the propagandists for the Nazi Satanists and this campaign of national security have tied it into the QAnon Pizzagate stuff. So, again, most recently we saw that this fella here in Minnesota, but there was the fellow there in then we have that black fellow that no one could quite understand. I think it was in Georgia, quite understand, maybe Florida, quite understand how this guy was a Nazi, right? This black fellow. Well, it's because he's subscribing to this Nazi Satanist ideology, and we've seen Aquino, out of his own statements, again, cite these matters as something that they venerate. And while Aquino will talk out both sides of his mouth at times, it's important to verify his statements. But at the same time, like, I'm willing to believe him when he makes these statements. And again, he's, for example, we've seen in his book there, in his autobiography of the Church of Satan, that he says publicly, he's like, I've never done any Nazi Satanist Thelemic magic rituals on military time. And then he goes in the book and is bragging about doing Nazi Thelemic Satanist rituals on military time. And not just U.S. military time. He did some of these Nazi Satanist Thelemic rituals, as cited in his book, and venerated. He's proud about it. He did this on NATO time when he was doing NATO business. He did it in castles over in Germany and Bavaria, where the Nazis did their little occult rituals. So we see an ongoing matters again in all of these kind of philosophies and the product thereof. So this was the Idaho shooter's father celebrating his love affair for Nazi stuff and Satanism. He's got his Church of Satan book there. You got to have that for breakfast with you. And then we see him playing the werewolf game. Again, Aquino cites in his own book that this werewolf component or sect of the Church of Satan and Temple of Set, they also do vampire stuff, folks. They got vampires. They got fucking werewolves. Watch out. So anyhow, we again, this is the Idaho shooter's father, and he seems to be pretty proud about these matters. I won't show this picture for long because that's a small child. But on that hand there, you see his outlaw biker gang Nazi tattoos, right? 1488, some Heil Hitlers, as they call it. So from the woman down there in Texas, aiding and abetting her son, Ashley Prado, there wearing her Process Church t-shirt with her Process Church tattoo. Wow, we've seen that before, haven't we, folks? A Process Church tattoo looks a lot like Lucien Greaves, Mr. Satanic Temple, Mr. Process.org himself, who was until recent years trying to work with them psychiatrists at the False Memory Syndrome Foundation, attacking victims of these matters. So again, it's interesting to highlight these recent events, but we've kind of been unpacking these matters, and we see these patterns of behavior repeating. So it is these matters and suggestions of national security, I think, that are very much a part of all of these things, because it's not my national security. Hard to believe it's your folks' national security either, to be quite honest with you, because I don't know who's national. It's a very vague statement. Oh, this is national security. According to the files of Ed Sanders, the author of The Family, the first true study there into the Manson situation, real time. I mean, Ed was out there at the trials and whatnot too. His private investigator he employed, Larry Larson, was told by the FBI that Sharon Tate of the Tate Polanski murders had to die over matters of national security. Something she had ever heard regarding Sirhan, old double Sirhan, the guy in prison for the murking of RFK, who was cited as being in attendance there at the Tate Polanski house for sex magic rituals by the Process. So, and again, these folks all know each other because we see the modern day incarnations of these elements, the folks perpetrating and proliferating not only the ideas that there are no Satanists out here murking folks and diddling kids ritual abuse style. They're the ones out there also promoting these ideas as a new age religion, right? Something we saw that's dating back to 1972 with Time magazine. You don't like Christianity anymore? Try Satanism. That was basically the headline, right? And we see folks like Nicholas Schreck. He was the former son-in-law there of Anton LaVey, and he would jump ship and join the Temple of Set with Aquino, years after Aquino had started. But nonetheless, we see him and his buddy Boyd Rice, who are proliferating these neo-process movements, who have a love affair with Charles Manson, no different than Houston shooter's mother, because that is a major figure in there and has been a major figure in these movements since we seen it in that 1987 Geraldo primetime special. I mean, again, what I'm folks of the interwebs, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. I'm simply pointing out things, the known knowns, if you will. When dealing with psychopaths, I like to, trying to get in the mind, the brain hole of a psychopath. I like to see what their statements are and see how they think, right?
As we know, there are known knowns. There are things we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't.
Old Donnie Rumsfeld makes some good points there, folks, about the unknown unknowns and the known knowns. And there's obviously some unknowns out there. Let's be honest about the situation. And you know what? He's not all that separated from that, what I was just talking about with old double Sirhan there in the RFK situation, right? So old Donald Rumsfeld's buddy in Congress, when they were both junior congressmen there in, I don't know, make up a state they're both from. I couldn't fucking tell you. I don't recall. Anyhow, it's not that important. So anyhow, my point there, folks, is his buddy, old Allard Lowenstein, again, and I like this is a good example of what we're talking about tonight with these matters of the the ongoing nature of these things, the ongoing cover-ups, and trying to convince folks, pay no attention to your senses. That is the psychological operations. We heard Aquino talking about it himself in that podcast interview here in a previous edition here tonight. folks of the interwebs again here on Operation GCD Thursdays, the anatomy of the Satanic Panic, where Aquino's citing how he was weaponizing the folklore and the religion of the local populations in Southeast Asia during Viet fucking Nam. So, and taking McGowan's theories of Colby and Aquino brought that Phoenix program home, well, and we call this Satanic Murder Inc. And again, we see it again proliferating here decades later in the same fashion. Meanwhile, we're still being told, pay no attention to your senses, folks. These are not the Satanists you're looking for, right? So these are the matters I think are very interesting. And it is interesting to note also, folks, the environment of how these things continue to proliferate. Not only just the propagandists, and their little, their ongoing script. Again, they all say the same statements. We've all seen Aquino say that out of his own mouth in Geraldo shows. We've heard him say it out of podcast interviews in recent years before he allegedly dies. And we've seen him write it in emails to McGowan. It's the same script. It's a telemarketing script. It's the Nazi Satanist telemarketing script, if you will. That's what I like to call it. Hey, am I back? Whoa, wait a second here. I also jammed up like my interwebs connection. Proliferate amongst our society, not only the ideas, but the terror, the shootings, the deaths, the victims continue, right? It continues to pile up here. But, understanding all of these things, I think, and how they continue to proliferate, I think one thing I've tried to stress here on Operation GCDs is the environment in which these things occur in. None of these things occur in a vacuum. In fact, as we look further into these matters, all of these fucking Nazi Satanists know each other. They all want to say, "Oh, we don't know each other," right? Like I know for example, I know folks like Lucy and Greaves. We've unpacked a lot of his Nazi Satanist propaganda, relative to old Laser Tag Ted Gunderson. If you folks don't know Laser Tag Ted.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
Watch out, folks. I got Ted twice. So, again, we've seen Lucy and Greaves, a.k.a. Doug Mesner, the head of the Satanic Temple, Nazi Satanist. I've witnessed him make claims and such online that he doesn't know folks like Boyd Rice, despite it being documented that he knows Boyd Rice. And we've met Boyd Rice. He was on that Geraldo show doing a bunch of Nazi Satanist stuff with his buddy Nicholas Schreck. Again, Nicholas Schreck on that show has a lock of Charles Manson's hair. I know most young girls do have a love affair with somebody and have a lock of their hair, much like Nicholas does of old Charlie there. But nonetheless, these are the matters that continue to proliferate. There we go. And we see these things going through the same pattern of behavior, very spooky situations with these intelligence, or as I call them, unintelligent operations. And the same thing would go for this Order of the Nine Angles situation. They kind of come out of the same kind of culture as the Process over there in MI6, the UK spooks there. And they do ancient alien stuff too. Part of those nine angles is the fact that 7 of those planets are, I try to not retain too much of their theology. So let me just check Wikipedia, the source of all information on the interwebs, folks. So the Order of the Nine Angles believe that the 7 planets and their satellites are connected to the dark gods. Satan is considered to be one of the 2 actual entities, the other one being Baphomet. Oh, Baphomet, we've heard about that guy, right? Baphomet, the same statue. Doug Mesner, aka Lucy and Greaves and gang, uses their main logo of the Satanic Temple. Again, the guy who runs the process.org website, who has a Process church tattoo on his arm right about the same spot that shooter's mother does down there in Houston, Ashley Prado. That's weird. Oh, she also has the Charles Manson tattoo on her other arm. She probably doesn't have a lock of hair like the Nicholas Schreck does. But again, these folks are all happy to tell us, and have been. This was 1987 from that Geraldo show, that they're ardent Nazi Satanists. And again, we see the same thing with the ideas of those Nazi Satanists that espoused by the Process et al. There, that humanity is the devil. We saw the Zizians say that when Jack LaSoda got busted after numerous murders, faking his own death numerous times. That Zith Lord, from the Silicon Valley-based, AI-focused, rationalist, vegan, transpocalypse, homicidal death cult, the Zith Lords, the Zizian death cult. He told the judge, I didn't do anything wrong. Well, that's what these folks believe. They believe humanity is, in fact, the devil. So, and they tell us that. So I'm happy to listen, open up my ear holes and see what they have to say about it, because they continue to act in a manner in which they do believe humanity is the devil. Otherwise, we wouldn't see that same repeating pattern of behavior. But and above the spooky operations, and understanding these 6 degrees, the environment, right? So we're doing some one of my favorite games, Operation GCD's Make-A-Wish for actor Kevin Bacon. You know, Kevin Bacon wants a new Patsy for the 6 degrees game. I'm happy to assist. In doing so, I want to focus on the fact that, well, I mean, obviously I like to have fun with this game, but it also highlights the environment these folks operate and come from. And we're going to unpack some more of that tonight here, relative specifically to Mikey Aino. The last time we played this game about 4 weeks ago there, we were focusing more on LeVay, because I thought it was important then to first establish that LeVay's not a carnival barker. He comes from we'll get into more of those connections again tonight to remind folks, but it's a very wealthy international operation, gun trafficking, occultists, and those folks just happen to be the financier. I think they call it that. The financier. As we learned from Anton LaVey's book, his he calls it an autobiography, but it says it's the official autobiography, but his second wife wrote it. His second wife, Blanche Barton, not to be confused with his first wife, who in all probable likelihoods was shacking up with old laser tag Ted, it seems.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
They got him twice. Sadly, the co-founder of the Church of Satan, his old side piece, apparently, LaVey's first wife, she's no longer with us to testify whether or not she was present for these laser tag attacks. But his second wife, Blanche Barton, tells us that Basil Zarhoff, this weird occultist that was kind of a opponent and contemporary to Crowley, was LaVey's hero and the heir to the family that was doing all the gun trafficking with him, the Vickers Gun Corporation, out of that old country of the Englands. Well, they just happen to be the first members of the Church of Satan. So, I think it's important to understand, folks like that. But again, when we're looking at Aquino, there's some other important salient characteristics to consider, but I don't want to belabor it any further, folks. So let's just let actor Kevin Bacon introduce it for us.
New MTV nighttime talk show called The Jon Stewart Show. And I come to find out that the Kevin Bacon guys, which is what they're now being called, the Kevin.
That is the wrong clip. I do apologize. But as we're looking for these matters and me getting the right clip, let's listen to that Nazi Satanist Boyd Rice. Again, this is a man who's not only the mentor to, as we saw, the QAnon Pizzagate phase, the ongoing phase and evolution of these anatomy of satanic panic, right? The satanic panic psychological operations, the weaponized folklore and religion that Mikey Aino brought home, right? How do you weaponize folklore in America? It's not the same way you weaponize folklore in Asia. Not against Buddhists and Christians. They have different belief systems. So Satanism, great way to weaponize it, right? And we see that in his own words, how they operate and his actions and, the fruits of his labor, right, folks? I'm happy to take their words, but also weigh it against their actions. Because, one thing I have to consider, and also the knowns and unknowns aspects of the psychopath's mindset there with old Donnie Rumsfeld. But, you also got to understand the other aspects. Like one of my fundamental rules in this world, folks, is never trust a Nazi. So I got to look at their words and statements and compare it against their actions to see if we can't discern what's really going on here. So, and again, we really don't know when we see these things continuing on the day, not only the actions, like speaking back to that Sirhan situation, double Sirhans, and the matters that apparently Sharon Tate had to die, overhearing something over that. Well, old Donnie Rumsfeld's buddy, Allard Lowenstein, was there in the Ambassador Hotel, along with process members, along with double Sirhans, and he was actually holding RFK's dead body. Now, Allard Lowenstein's staffer that would pick him up at the airport in New York City when he got back from that trip to Los Angeles in June of '68 was also a member of the Process Church. So we don't understand these things today. That's what I'm saying. Understanding the environment helps us understand, like, for example, understanding where they started, how these matters started, you know. And again, Boyd Rice is a major figure in all of these things, you know, ball washing Charles Manson for years with his Manson Files stuff he started there in the late 80s, Church of Satan, you know. Reportedly, Anton LaVey was trying to give Boyd Rice the leadership handed down to him. He declined as his claims. He's the mentor during these years to folks like Doug Lucian Greaves there from the Satanic Temple, Doug Mesner, aka Lucian Greaves, you know, and he's also the mentor to folks like Tracy Twyman. Again, back to that evolution of the propagandist where she fills in where old Laser Tag Ted took off, you know, left off. We also see Boyd Rice, the devout Satanist Nazi from the Geraldo show, being a mentor to folks and other folks in the neo-process movement. Notably Trent Reznor and Marilyn Manson, who both launched their careers in a studio in that Tate Polanski death house in Cielo Drive, in a studio that Reznor built named La Pig Studios, named after those murders because, you know, the blood written on the wall. So again, these are identifying these pattern behaviors, and, you know, is what I aim to do here, and then unpacking these matters of the 6 degrees stuff. Once we helps us understand these things, because again, when we understand how not only deeply connected is in the spook stuff, gun trafficking stuff, well, very wealthy internationalists, if you will, Aquino's connections are even more intriguing, perhaps. And that's what we're going to be diving into tonight. But let's listen to Boyd Rice real quick, because he seems to have a major impact in all of these things. And again, we see ongoing matters. You can call it 09A, you can call it process, you can call it whatever you want, but these folks who all, again, the lady's got a Process Church t-shirt on with a Process Church tattoo. Looks like Lucian, same kind of tattoo, and Charles Manson's tattoo on her arm there. What are we talking about?
And racial purity.
This has historically been a sacred day, a day of purification, a day of hell and fury. We mourn not its victims, we honor its victors. In closing, I would remind those here that murder is the predator's prerogative, and there is no birth without blood.
I mean, that seems pretty aggressive, right? But we see, again, weighing it against the actions we see of folks that follow this philosophy. I'm not saying Boyd Rice pulled the trigger. We do see him connected to all these matters. And again, that was 1987. What are we learning here, folks? Again, if we keep telling ourselves as a society, or even in conspiracy culture, that there's not more to these matters, right? Then we're not continuing to be propagandized under these same talking points, the same telemarketing script approved and stamped by Colonel Michael Aquino, everyone's favorite, you know, old Muppet Mikey, everyone's favorite psychological operations Nazi Satanist. Then again, understanding that aspect of it is understanding these matters are ongoing, are a big part of solving and hopefully, you know, stopping these matters, right? The victim, like I said, we tried to unpack a little bit last week, folks. The victimization of this is not, it's the, you know, it has various levels of it, right? There's various, outlying effect. It's not just the immediate, obviously, you know, if someone's getting murdered, that's a victim, and if you get diddled, you're a victim. But I'm just saying there's more to that than just those matters. Again, we see the same telemarketing involving parties that they all know each other, right? And you have to ask, how organized is this? How well funded is this? And what the fuck is really going on here?
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
In the trailer, it mentioned a book called Michelle Remembers. Can you tell us about that book, Michelle Remembers, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Victoria, so Michelle Remembers is by 2 authors from Victoria.
Which some Canadian psychiatrist said that his wife, under hypnosis, had recalled being mangled, you know, by the Church of Satan when she was a kid. Well, we never had any Church of Satan in Canada.
Station at the preschool. The author of Michelle Remembers, co-author of Michelle Remembers, Lawrence Pazder, comes to speak to the parents about the crimes of satanic ritual abuse and what to look for and that type of thing. So you have all the makings of a moral panic, and then Ted Gunderson comes in too.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
The reason that it fizzled out as a fad, finally the FBI did a major study on the whole notion of satanic child abuse and just said this whole thing is a crock, and there's never been one verified instance of it anywhere.
I personally come from a really cynical, skeptical family. So like there's a couple characters in the film that I think people can learn a lot from: the FBI agent, Ken Lanning, and the investigative journalist, Debbie Nathan. I think everyone needs some more skepticism in their lives. Ask people questions, ask why, right? And also take the time to think.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
Martin, and you can see, because this comes into play later on, Ted Gunderson claimed to find tunnels underground in McMartin, but it seems if kids were talking about tunnels at McMartin, there were these colorful boxes that were built by one of the people who ran the McMartin preschool, and they would make these tunnels that the kids could go through. They would usually put them in this kind of horseshoe formation, and they could crawl about through the boxes. So those are the real tunnels of McMartin.
There's thousands of Americans out there. By the way, I've been shot with a laser beam twice.
They didn't get him just once, folks. They got old laser tag Ted twice. But we see the telemarketing script there. Yes, sir. Thank you much. Calls him how's the season. So we see the telemarketing script. Michelle remembers, Charles Manson's friends would hire them as the expert to bury that whole McMartin situation. The tunnels that Lucian there was talking about, Process Church Tattoo Lucian, Process.org Lucian, the Satanic Temple Lucian, who uses the Baphomet statue, the same statue Tracy Twyman refused to ever talk about, probably because, that old Nazi Satanist party they have, in between there, old Mr. Boyd Rice probably didn't like it. None of them liked it. So, but we do see these matters, and it's important to understand these folks all know each other. It's important to understand the military aspects, the spooky nature of things, the psychological warfare by a Star Wars fan fiction writer, old Muppet Mikey Aino, who would have you believe, because he's an ancient alien cargo cultist Nazi Satanist fucker, then he would have you believe in his Jedi mind trick of Satanism shit, like, oh, these are not the Satanists you're looking for. Well, it didn't work, Mike. And it, despite their ongoing efforts, right? Because they are ongoing efforts, but there's obviously money attached to these things, the gun trafficking, etc. But as we'll see with Mikey Aino tonight, it gets even creepier, because if you start considering the aspects that his mother was part of the Lewis Terman study, well, and the ongoing nature of the studying of these gifted kids, even their offspring, starts to paint a different picture of all of these matters as being some sort of really twisted sociological operation by those fucking Nazis. But anyhow.
The 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. In case you haven't heard of this game, the idea is that any actor alive or dead can be connected to me through our work in 6 steps or less. How did all this start? In 1994, I'm minding on my own business. I'm making movies. I'm trying to raise my family. And I don't remember exactly how I first heard about it, but it just kind of started to seep into my life, People will come up to me and say things like, my cousin made up a game about you. Or, dude, I'm so hungover, man. I was in a bar last night, and we were playing your game. I got shit-faced, and I'm a mess. I was absolutely horrified. I was furious. But I stopped, and I said to myself, sometimes you have to confront your demons. Sometimes you got to face the beast. So I said, I'm going to go in and I'm going to look these guys in the eyes. I'm going to say, listen, fellas, get another Patsy, okay? Find somebody else.
You asked for it, Kevin Bacon. 6 Degrees of Muppet Mikey Aino. But again, we're going to do a quick recap again of some of those things with LeVay. His hero, Basil Zarhoff, the guy financed by that Vickers Gun Manufacturing Corporation, whom of which were the early members, and the heir of which that corporation was the early member and financier, I believe is how you pronounce it, of the Church of Satan. So again, it's the origins of these things. It's where these things have gotten us today, folks, the origins of which they got us there, and unpacking that road in between. But, Again, it is matters of such that we also learn in that same book, right, by Blanche Barton, the second wife of Anton LaVey, not the first wife, not Ted, not laser tag Ted side piece there, in all likelihood, right? As again, she was a criminologist and handwriting expert in the same city and private investigator in the same city that Ted was. So these rumors seem to persist over the years that they knew each other. I tend to believe they're accurate, despite me not being able to yet to find concrete evidence of such. But it is interesting to establish the environment, the 6 degrees, as old Kevin Bacon would request, of these folks, these Nazi Satanist fuckers. Not the least of which Mr. Basil Zarhoff here. But we also learned in that book that the grandson of a U.S. president, right? That's how it was described by Blanche Barton, that a grandson of a U.S. president was also an early member of that same organization, the Church of Satan. Well, that grandson just happened to be a fellow by the name of William Donner Roosevelt, it appears. The grandson of one Teddy Roosevelt. Disregard. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And his wife is an interesting character. When I say these people all know each other, his wife was Ava Meyer Roosevelt. She just happened to be the protege of Sharon Tate. And she claimed she was almost the Manson family's 6th victim. So you have this fellow over on the Church of Satan side, which again, LaVey and Aquino knew all of those Manson folks. We learned that last time in the 6 Degrees game we played a few weeks back. Well, now we have the financiers connected to these matters. That's strange. And speaking of financiers and that Vickers Gun Manufacturing Corporation and Basil Zarhoff, the heir of which to this corporation, as mentioned in Blanche Barton's book, a fellow by the name of Bouvier, his wife was Maria Astor. Disregard, not Maria, something Astor. She was the daughter of John Jacob Astor IV, not to be confused with 2 times. That's what they got Ted twice. John Jacob Astor IV, and from the famed, infamous Titanic situation. So again, we see why these things are proliferating once we can understand the environment and where these things came from. So, and speaking of which, the wife of Bouvier, that Astor lady, was in fact the first cousin to a founding member of the Process Church of the Final Judgment. So all these Nazi Satanist fuckers know each other. And that's what I'm talking about with understanding the 6 degrees. And old William Donner Roosevelt, well, he just started killing folks when he was 10 years old, folks. And, murder was apparently in his blood, apparently. So William Donner Roosevelt, 10-year-old grandson of President Roosevelt, today was ordered arraigned in Delaware County Juvenile Court on Friday by Judge Albert Dalton McDade in the fatal shooting of his playmate, an 11-year-old boy. Oh, don't worry, they let him out of jail, that day, and he was never held accountable. But it's cool. These are not the Satanists you're looking for. So this is what I'm talking about here, folks. And relative to Aquino and his 6 degrees, well, his mother was very interesting. And again, that program she was involved in. So we're gonna be unpacking some of those ideas. And if folks aren't familiar with the Terman study, I don't blame you. I didn't know about it either. But let me play a brief clip for y'all. And folks of the interwebs, I thank y'all again here for joining me tonight to get OpGCD, talking about the anatomy of the satanic panic. The ongoing murdering, satanic murder operations and ritual sexual abuse of children that have been tormenting and plaguing America for decades. Meanwhile, we have a well-funded, well-financed operation to convince you, all of us, myself included, you folks of the interwebs, do not trust your senses. These are not the Satanists you're looking for. Pay no attention to the satanic ritual murder and sexual ritual abuse of children. That's not happening. That's what they keep telling us, right? It's the ongoing psychological operation. But what if all that was part of even a greater, weirder study? With these damn Nazis, you got to wonder about that, right? With these sociological experiments, such as this Terman experiment. So the Terman experiment, where the initial gifted students, well, their offspring would be part of this too. So that would qualify Aquino and all of his activities in life.
If you've spent much time on social media sites or blogs, you've almost certainly come across ads for online IQ tests that return your results in minutes. Maybe you've even taken these tests in order to see what your IQ really is. The proliferation of these kinds of tests on the internet says a great deal about the interest and importance that people place on individual IQs. Much of the credit for that interest can go to a man by the name of Lewis Terman. Lewis Terman was an influential American psychologist and pioneer of educational psychology. Born in Indiana in 1877, Terman's parents were farmers. Terman developed a passion for reading at an early age that sparked a seemingly insatiable pursuit of knowledge. His aptitude for education led him to enroll at the Central Normal College in Danville, Indiana, at the age of 15, graduating in 1894 with a BS in education and again in 1898 with a BA. After graduating from Central Normal, Terman enrolled at Indiana University in pursuit of a graduate degree. He ultimately completed a PhD at Clark University in 1905, where he studied under influential psychologist G. Stanley Hall.
So that's Lewis Terman, a little bit of background on him. And the program starts out. And again, this is a program that Betty Ford Aquino, not the Betty Ford you're thinking, but Betty Ford Aquino, Michael's mother, would be one of the subjects too, right? And all these Nazi kind of experiments.
An intelligence quotient, IQ, is the number that represents a person's ability to use
intelligence
logic
quotient
and reason
IQ stuff too,
in order to
from
solve
Terman.
problems, which is measured against the statistical norm for their group. The term was first established in the initial intelligence testing of French psychologists Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon that began being used in 1905.
Well, so Terman basically, he focuses on that IQ. And that is the contention of which that study is. So basically the study is that you have all these gifted students, right? It's the first gifted program. And you're going to study them. They have, I think it's north of 130, I think is the cutoff maybe. When Edwards would have qualified, he had a 132 at the age of 13. You know, that homicidal, psychopathic, satanic serial killer who was friends with Charles Manson. That's strange, right? That's a weird environment, right? Because all these fuckers love Charles Manson. And again, they tell us these things. We've seen them tell us these things, including Nicholas Schreck, Boyd Rice's buddy.
Along with Hitler, cult leader Charles Manson is today's top satanic celebrity.
Yeah, I chopped up 9 hogs, and I'm going to chop up some more, you I'm going to kill you as many as I can. I'm going to pile you up to the sky.
Responsible for at least 9 ritual murders, Manson is revered by many modern-day devil worshippers who have adopted his philosophy of the mass extermination of those they consider unfit to live.
We would like to see most of the human race killed off because it is unworthy. It is unworthy of the gift of life.
Nicholas Schreck visited Charlie at San Quentin, keeps a picture of his hero on his apartment wall, and displays a lock of Manson's hair as if it were a sacred relic.
A bloodbath would be a cleansing and a purification of a planet that has been dirtied and degraded for too long.
David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, was also a Satanist, the serial killer who terrorized New York while murdering 5 young women and seriously wounding.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Now, thank you all for joining me here tonight. We're going to be going over here to Patreon here. But again, these folks will tell us themselves they're devout Nazi Satanists. So, happy to take their words for that, right? So when we're unpacking these things further, folks, again, folks at the interwebs, patreon.com/OpGCD will be over there here for the remainder of the show. But we're going to be looking at these ideas. So what if all of these matters? We're going to look at some of Aquino's and the 6 degrees there, right? We're also going to look at these matters such as what if all of this is some sort of weird, fucked up Nazi social experiment to see how just shit goes down. They're going to keep letting the serial killer Nazi Satanist murk folks and do so in a terrorizing manner in which to then study society and the people's and folks' reaction therein. Because if Aquino is part of this Terman study, I think that's a very reasonable question to ask. And we were dealing with all these Nazi Satanist ancient alien cargo cult fuckers. Again, Order of Nine Angles, they're doing those deep alien stuff, right? Aquino's got his Council of Nine. That's their top little council there in their little Nazi Satanist organization and outfit. Not the least of which, again, these werewolves. So when we're talking about the ongoing kind of warfare aspects of it, right? So you got the werewolf corps. We saw Aquino again. We've seen Aquino say that that's what they're aiming for, right? We want a guerrilla warfare Nazi Satanist organization based upon the original Nazis. The werewolf corps, right, was a Nazi plan, fucking Nazis, which began development in 1944 to create a resistance force which would operate behind enemy lines. Oh, that sounds very much like a Colby Queer Operation Gladio style campaign. Behind enemy lines as the Allies advanced through Germany in parallel with the, you name that word, Wehrmacht, fighting in front of the lines. There was some argument that the plan and subsequent reports of guerrilla activities were created by Joseph Goebbels through propaganda. Go fuck yourself. See how that works? They're like, yeah, there's all these things, but yeah, it was all propaganda by Goebbels. And I think that's an important thing to note here too, because again, Aquino cites this as his inspiration. We see these LARPing werewolf fuckers and his son who's murking, or at least involved in the murking of some firefighters there in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, just outside the Aryan Nation's compound on the anniversary in which that compound was sent bankrupt by the feds. It's weird. These folks love anniversaries. But we see here, one important takeaway here also, folks, before we pop over to Patreon, is the psychological operations aspect of it. So, when I'm thinking about these Nazis, everything, if I've learned anything from George Lucas films, Steven Spielberg films, such as the Indiana Jones series, their little collaboration there, I've learned, again, never trust a Nazi, but, those fucking Nazis. So, one thing to consider, though, is let's look how the DNC or the RNC operates today, right? It's very compartmentalized. It's a top-down operation that impacts every layer of government, politics, judges, county commissioners. They all have to run on an election ballot for one of these operations, and therefore folks inside and outside of that operation have different layers of compartmentalization. Nonetheless, it's a nationwide network just on its face. So, you look at that and you look at how the Nazis operated within their party. It was a political party, right? So they came to power. Well, it's very compartmentalized. So Joseph Goebbels, the chief propagandist there, that apparently in Wikipedia, the source of all information on the interwebs, wants to say these werewolf guerrilla fighting, guerrilla warfare tactics, like the fella in Idaho whose dad LARPs as a fucking Nazi Satanist werewolf fucker with the Hitler tattoos, the outlaw biker gangs, etc. Well, we see Goebbels' secretary did a documentary before she died back in 2014 saying she knew nothing. And I'll put a link in the show notes. Folks can check it out. I tend to believe the old lady because, again, that's the nature of propaganda. You don't want to let the compartmentalization of these operations is, I'm going to tell this old bag, or she was a younger bag then, but you're not going to tell this old bag that, what's going on. Even if you are the secretary to the chief propagandist. She works for a political party on its face that do some wild shit. Both political parties in this country do some wild shit. So, I don't think it's that far off to understand some of these matters and how it may proliferate. Again, proliferate. These fuckers all know each other, grandsons of FTR and whatnot, and Astors that are financing the Church of Satan, who are founding members of the Process Church. So it is interesting to understand these matters, but also interesting to think what if all of this is not only just a psychological operation, but a sociological study courtesy of Lewis Terman in this gifted program, and Aquino's mother, and thereby Aquino being qualified in that longitudinal study that is on paper to exist throughout the term of these folks' life. So that's what we're getting into here tonight, folks of the interwebs, giving Kevin Bacon his, Operation GCD, make a wish for Kevin Bacon, finding that new Patsy, 6 degrees of Muppet Mikey Aino, and exploring some more of those ideas further. So I do thank you all for joining me here tonight to get a little GCD. Be over there on the Patreon side shortly, and Patreon folks. I appreciate you all support and joining in the conversation, commentary, and feedback over there. And tomorrow night we'll have, or I'll have, sharp fella, a fellow ex-Mormon like myself, Jacob J from the Liberty Rise podcast. He'll be joining me for Fridays tomorrow night. And sharp dude, I like his style, like where his brain hole's at, but he keeps trying to out JJ me, and I will not have that. I will have none of that. And on Operation GCD Sundays, we'll have the case of Dale Shackelford. So this is going to be an interesting conversation, folks. So it'll be a 6 degrees situation. We're going to do a 6 degrees of fabricated murder case, like the case against Dale Shackelford, compared and contrasted against the case against Brian Kohberger in the same county of Latell County, aka Satan's Butthole. See, welcome to Idaho, Satan's Butthole. And this one occurred May of 1999 by the same prosecuting attorney, Bill Thompson, in the case. And one of the victims here, besides Shackelford's ex-wife, allegedly, because, you know, it seems to have not been concluded, the arguments that his attorney made in the initial trial when he wouldn't take that plea agreement, because Shackelford kept arguing that the victim, the woman in the burn-up cabin, along with Chuck Palahniuk's father, Fred Palahniuk, Fred or Frank, we'll call him Fred. He was the other victim. He just happened to meet Shackelford's ex-wife on a classified ad back in 1999, allegedly, right? Just happened, first date, goes over there, gets murked, burned up in a cabin. That's how the story goes, folks. It's weird how Fight Club would be a major, be released later that year as a major, very profitable event for her son. I'm just saying. But anyhow, the woman in the burn-up cabin apparently had a uterus, and apparently old Dale here, Muppet Dale here, his ex-wife did not, I repeat, did not have a uterus. So when they couldn't force that square peg in the round hole, old Bilbert Thompson, their Latell County prosecutor, would charge Dale's fiance and her mother for an accessory after the fact, and her father. And the father would turn on the mother and his daughter and testify against all of them and Dale and get his charges dropped. And the mother and fiance would do 6 months out of a 4-year stint that they got. So this is apparently justice in Idaho. There's a lot of things to compare, and that's an interesting case. So that'll be Operation GCD Sundays, folks. Come check that out here. Do a free Patreon preview, of course, and then pop on over there for the other sides on the Patreon sides. And again, this will be 9:15 p.m. tomorrow night with old dude's trying to out JJ me. We'll have none of it, but Jacob J, Rise to Liberty. And then on disregards, Wednesdays, Operation GCD Wednesdays coming up. An occult and esoteric review or esoteric review of The Goonies, the 1985 cinematic masterpiece, The Goonies. Be joined by Clint Eastwood over there from the Third World Assassin YouTube channel, and his occasional co-host, and very sharp dude, old Todd the Wizard, another ex-Mormon, much like myself. That's why I gave him a logo on there of Joseph Smith reading his Book of Mormon while operating a space alien ship. Then I put the little circle through it and say no, because he's no longer a Mormon there. So, but it is these ancient alien cargo cults, and we see it again with Mikey Aino when we were unpacking these 6 degrees. His first wife, not the second wife, his first wife was of a deep OG Mormon family. And we see the ancient alien cargo cult nonsense across the entire spectrum of all of these Nazi Satanist fucker activities, not the least of which Crowley himself. A lot of comparisons between him and Joseph Smith too, by the way, just saying. And it's recognized by ongoing matters such as these neo-process movement, like Damien Eccles, the guy that runs around with, Marilyn Manson and Johnny Depp, Boyd Rice's friends, the guy that's screaming about Nazi shit back in 1987. So weird times we live in here, folks, in Muppet world, but it is in fact the circumstances we are presented. And on that note, folks of the interwebs, I thank you for joining me here tonight. Jump on over to patreon.com/Operation GCD. If you hear this broadcast in the future, do the same. And see y'all tomorrow night for Fridays. with Jacob J. from Rise of Liberty. Sundays there with the case of Dale Shackelford, a 6 degrees comparison with the case against Brian Kohbergers by the same place, the same Muppet attorney and prosecuting attorney Bilbert Thompson. And then Goonies, one of my favorite films, the 1985 cinematic masterpiece, coming up next Wednesdays. So thank you all again for joining me here tonight. Appreciate you all joining me over there on the Patreon side. Appreciate all the support and commentary, feedback, joining the conversation over there. And I look forward to joining me here again to get a little GCD on our future shows here, like I just described. And on that note, we'll be doing Mr. Kevin Bacon, a service, Operation GCD Make-A-Wish style, finding him that new Patsy. You got it, Kevin Bacon. We'll answer your request. 6 degrees of Muppet Mikey Aino. And on that note, folks of the interwebs, I'll see Patreon folks here in a few minutes on Patreon, and catch y'all next time.
Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Join us on the journey and enjoy the show. Thanks for joining us to get a little GCD. Yeah, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo coats haunt the moon's pale beam. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Hell, the world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Operation GCD with an Appalachian grin. Adventures and shenanigans, we're diving right in. Out in the holler where the secrets creep, garbage can dudes digging mighty deep. Secret societies, shadows in the pines. Operation GCD of American rebels design. Double J searching deep in his brain hole, past layers of melted hops and bone resin. From cults to cover-ups, we're talking about all of that. So watch your sixth friend in the truth we trust. The world's a puzzle, grunge rock ain't what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. what it seems. Ancient alien cargo cults haunt the moon's pale beams. Cincinnati schemers, history's a haze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze. Double J's on the mic, lighting things ablaze.